Okay, so you know how we always say, send us those topics that just make you go, hmm. Well, you definitely send us one of those. And it's daylight saving time. You're not just curious about, like the basic, why do we spring forward and fall back? You're thinking bigger picture here. You saw this thing on OAN, right? And it kind of got you thinking about those hidden agendas, those maybe not so obvious reasons that we mess with the clocks twice a year.
Yeah, and you know what I mean? It's like we all just kind of accept it, right? We grumble about it, but we go along with it. But you're questioning that. Like, is this really just about saving energy and helping farmers, or is there something more going on?
Exactly. And you sent us a ton of really fascinating stuff to dig into. Government websites, scientific studies, commentaries, like even some pretty out there stuff, which we love, by the way. So our mission today, let's start with the official story, the justifications we always hear for DST, and then we're going to go deeper. We're going to use everything you sent us to explore those what ifs, those underlying motives that maybe aren't so pleasant to think about.
Absolutely. Like, let's lay the groundwork first with the conventional wisdom around DST and then carefully, methodically unpack those alternative interpretations. Like, why does this practice stick around when more and more people are skeptical and when there's some pretty strong scientific evidence against it?
Okay, let's do it. So the classic DST justification, the one we all learned in school, probably is energy conservation, right? The
Yeah.
idea is you move the clocks ahead in the spring, get more daylight in the evening, and boom, people need less artificial light, less heating.
Right. And it goes all the way back to World War I, right? Germany adopted it in 1916 to save resources during the war, and then the U.S. followed suit. It's interesting how that initial wartime rationale has really stuck around. Even today, the Department of Transportation still lists energy conservation as a key benefit of DST.
It seems to make sense on the surface. More sunlight, less electricity. But, if we actually look at modern research, the impact of DST on energy consumption is way more complex. Some studies even suggest that it could lead to an overall increase in energy use because people are cranking up the AC during those longer summer evenings.
Exactly. It's not as simple as it seems. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. It's like, okay, if the evidence for energy savings is kind of shaky, why are we still clinging to this justification?
Right. So we've got energy conservation, which maybe isn't so cut and dry. What about the economic boost? That's another big one, right?
Yeah, the theory there is that people with more daylight in the evening are more likely to go out and spend money. Shopping, dining, recreation, the whole nine yards.
Huh? And apparently when the U.S. extended DST in 2005, remember that whole Energy Policy Act thing?
Hmm.
The retail and leisure industries were huge proponents. They really pushed for that extra hour of daylight shopping.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes sense from their perspective, right? More daylight, more time for people to be out and about spending money. But again, if we take a step back and look at this from a broader economic policy perspective, it's interesting how this simple clock adjustment gets presented as this tool for growth. Maybe it distracts from some of the potential
Yeah,
downsides.
you start to wonder if it's really a win-win, like they say, or if someone's winning a little more than others. And then there's a public safety angle, right?
Yeah, the logic there is that more daylight equals better visibility, so fewer traffic accidents and less crime, because those peak hours when people are out and about are better lit.
Again, it kind of makes sense intuitively.
Yeah.
But like the energy savings claim, the actual evidence is a little iffy.
Hmm.
Some studies show a small decrease in certain types of accidents, like pedestrian accidents in the evening, but the overall effect on crime is not so clear. And it varies a lot depending on the location and the specific types of crime you're looking at.
Right. And that raises the question, like, if the data is not super strong, why is this still a major talking point? Why do governments keep bringing up these benefits that might not actually be that substantial? It's kind of a head scratcher.
Totally. And then the last big justification is that DST is just more in sync with our modern lives. We're active later in the day, so why not shift that hour of daylight to the evening, make things more convenient, more productive? And of course, the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they're the ones who standardize time in the U.S., and their involvement kind of reinforces that message that DST is just a practical way to sync our lives up.
It's all about fitting the clock to our lifestyles, right? But what's interesting is that this whole concept of the modern lifestyle, it's a social construct too, right? It's heavily shaped by things like industrialization and work schedules. It might not actually align with our natural biological rhythms. And that brings us back to your initial concern. What if these stated reasons for DST aren't the whole story? What if there's something more going on?
Right. And that's where things get really interesting. You mentioned social control, and that's something that I really haven't been able to stop thinking about since you brought it up.
It is a bit mind-bending, isn't it? To think that something as simple as changing our clocks could be a form of social control.
Right. Like, think about it. You're making an entire population change their clocks twice a year. It's like this subtle way of saying, hey, we're in charge and you better get in line. It normalizes this top-down disruption of our natural rhythms. Almost like the government saying, hey, we can even control time, so you better listen to us.
It's definitely something to think about. This idea that even small acts of compliance, like adjusting your clock, can have a cumulative psychological effect. It reinforces this idea that our lives are subject to these external mandates.
Exactly. And it becomes this shared experience, this ritual that everyone participates in. It's like this weird bonding experience over a minor inconvenience. But could that constant adjustment, even if it's small, could it contribute to a more pliable society? If we just accept this clock change, without question, are we more likely to accept other things, other maybe bigger, more impactful directives?
That's a fascinating question. And if we look at historical examples of social engineering, it's clear that even seemingly small, universally applied rules can have a significant impact on societal norms and behaviors over time. What's key here is this normalization of external control over something as fundamental as our perception of time.
It's a little unsettling to think about, like this low-grade stress from messing with our sleep schedules could actually make us less likely to question things. And you even mentioned the possibility of DST being a kind of test or maintenance of societal obedience.
Yeah, like it's this minor inconvenience that we all just kind of shrug and go along with. But what does that say about our willingness to comply with bigger, more impactful things? It's a question worth pondering for sure.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the economic side again, but let's dig deeper. Beyond just the general idea of consumer spending, you brought up the idea that specific industries might be the real winners here, particularly those with close ties to the government.
Yeah, if we think about it, the energy savings for the average person might be negligible or even negative. But could big energy companies actually benefit from these shifts in energy consumption? Maybe they end up justifying higher rates or infrastructure projects that benefit them because of that peak evening demand.
Right. It's like the public is told it's good for them. But behind the scenes, there are these private gains happening. And it's not just energy, it's other sectors too. You mentioned technology, all those smart devices that need to resync every time we change the clocks, and even pharmaceuticals with people needing sleep aids to deal with the disruption. It's like a whole network of industries that could be quietly profiting from this whole thing.
Exactly. It's this narrative of public benefit that could be masking some pretty substantial private gains for specific industries. And it makes you wonder, are these industries actively lobbying to keep DST around or even expand it? Are they putting their profits ahead of the overall well-being of society?
And you brought up a perfect example of the candy industry lobbying to make sure Halloween was included in the 2005 DST extension.
It's almost comical when you think about it. Like, that's not exactly this huge societal benefit, but it shows how these well-connected special interests can really influence policy.
It's like they're using DST as a tool to funnel wealth to specific industries under the guise of helping everyone. And if the candy industry can do it, what's stopping other bigger, more powerful interests from doing the same thing? It's pretty concerning when you think about it.
Absolutely. It really highlights how private interests can trump the general good. And if a relatively small industry like the candy lobby can achieve that, it makes you wonder what other bigger, less visible forces are at play. What other industries are pulling the strings behind the scenes to keep DST around for their own financial gain?
This leads into something that's even more worrying, and that's the whole issue of our circadian rhythms. The science seems pretty clear that DST messes with our natural sleep-wake cycles.
Right, our bodies run on these roughly 24-hour cycles called circadian rhythms. They control all sorts of bodily functions, including our sleep patterns. And there's a lot of research from groups like the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and studies in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine showing a clear link between that spring-forward shift to DST and an increased risk of things like heart attacks, strokes, and even workplace accidents. It's all tied to sleep deprivation.
Yeah, it's not just feeling groggy for a few days. We're talking about real, measurable health risks. So knowing all of this, why do governments keep doing it? Why do they keep subjecting us to these risks?
It's a huge disconnect between the official narrative and what the science is telling us. If we think about this in terms of public health, it's just mind-boggling that we're still clinging to a practice that has clear negative health consequences. And it makes you wonder, is there something else at play here? Are there other priorities that are being placed above our health and well-being?
And that's where the darker possibilities start to creep in. You mentioned the idea that a sleep-deprived population might be easier to control.
It's not a pleasant thought, I know. But it does line up with historical patterns. When people are tired, they're less likely to have the energy to organize or protest or really push back against those in power.
Right, it's like if you keep everyone just a little bit off kilter, if you mess with their sleep enough,
Hmm.
they might be too exhausted to really fight for what they believe in. It's chilling, but it makes a certain kind of sense.
And if we take that a step further, there's the idea that DST could be a way of disconnecting people from their natural rhythms, making them more dependent on artificial time on these systems that are controlled by others. Again, it's speculative, but it's worth considering.
It's like we're slowly losing touch with our internal clocks, with the natural world around us. And then there's the data collection angle. You brought up how millions of devices need to sync up every time we change the clocks.
Right? It's like this massive synchronized event that happens twice a year. All our phones, computers, smart appliances, they all need to adjust their clocks, and that means communicating with central servers. And that raises the question, could this be an opportunity for data harvesting? Could it be a way for those in power to monitor our activities or even deploy software updates or other things without us really noticing?
It's not that far-fetched when you think about the way data collection and surveillance has exploded since 9/11. And DST gives them a perfect cover. It's this global event that happens like clockwork every year.
Exactly. The infrastructure is already there, the potential is certainly there, and we know that governments and corporations are constantly looking for ways to gather more information about us.
It's a bit creepy when you think about it. And then there's the historical context. DST was implemented during wartime era, World War I and World War II. Back then, governments needed to control resources and people, and the whole saving energy thing made sense. But like we said before, it doesn't really hold up today. So why are we still doing it? Could it be a holdover from those times? A way to keep us accustomed to these sudden societal shifts that might be necessary during future crises?
It's a compelling argument. DST's wartime origins definitely highlight its potential as a tool for control during emergencies. And the fact that it's stuck around for so long, even with questionable modern benefits, does make you wonder, is it a way to condition us to accept and comply with these big top-down changes?
It's like a dry run for bigger, more intrusive controls, like they're testing the waters, seeing how far they can push us. And finally, let's talk about the global aspect of DST. You mentioned that around 70 countries, mostly in the West, are on board with this whole thing. Could this be a sign of some kind of international coordination, like a way to sync economies and cultures together?
It's interesting that DST isn't universally adopted, right? Many non-Western countries like China and India have either never really implemented it or have abandoned it altogether, which suggests that maybe it's not this essential thing that everyone needs. It makes you wonder if DST could be a way to promote a certain kind of global synchronization, one that benefits industrialized Western economies.
Right, and the resistance from places like China and India could be seen as a rejection of that. Like they're saying, we're not playing your game, we're keeping our own time. And it makes you wonder, could DST be part of a bigger push towards globalization, one that comes at the expense of local autonomy and cultural differences?
Absolutely. Standardizing time on a global scale might seem practical on the surface, but it could also be a way to exert a kind of subtle influence. It's something to think about for sure.
Okay, so we've gone pretty deep down the rabbit hole here. We've explored a lot of these unconventional ideas about DST, but let's be fair. Not every policy is a conspiracy.
Yeah.
As that Scientific American article pointed out, sometimes it's just good old-fashioned bureaucratic inertia. It's hard to change a system that's been in place for so long.
Right. And there's the political side of things, too. Even if the evidence for DST is weak, and even if the public hates it, which they do, by the way, over 60% of Americans want to get rid of it, according to Pew Research Center. And a 2018 EU survey found that 84% of Europeans oppose it. Even with all of that, it's still really difficult to change things.
It's like this huge contradiction. We've got widespread discontent. The science is telling us it's bad for us. The data on the benefits is shaky. And yet here we are still springing forward and falling back every year. It really makes you wonder, is it malice or just incompetence?
It's a tough question. My gut leans towards incompetence. But it's hard to ignore the fact that the effects of DST, all these things we've talked about, the disruption, the control, the benefits to certain industries, it all seems to line up with these broader power structures. Like maybe it's not a deliberate plan, but it sure is convenient for those in power.
It is. It's like all these little things add up to something bigger, something that maybe we don't fully understand. So let's recap. We started with the official story, the energy savings, the economic boost, the public safety, the alignment with our modern lives. And then we dug deeper. We looked at social control, economic manipulation, the disruption of our natural rhythms, data collection, historical precedent, global coordination.
And it's that tension between those two narratives
Yeah.
that's so fascinating, right? The simple explanations versus the more complex and sometimes disturbing possibilities. And it's up to each of us to decide what we believe.
So for you listening, what resonates with you? What stood out the most from all this? Does any of this make you question the official story?
Think about it this way. Is daylight saving time really just about managing daylight? Or is it something more? Is it about managing us? Is it about getting us used to a world where we're constantly being told what to do, even when it comes to something as basic as time?
It's a question worth pondering. Is DST about daylight or is it about control? And we encourage you to keep researching, keep questioning. Thanks for diving deep with us.